Nobody expected Marcus Rivera to become a hero on that rain-soaked Tuesday evening in October. Living paycheck to paycheck in a cramped apartment above Gonzalez Auto Repair with his 8-year-old son Diego, Marcus was just trying to keep his head above water when a luxury sedan crashed into the guardrail 50 yards from his shop. With nothing but basic first aid knowledge and a toolbox full of worn equipment, he didn't just save the injured driver's life, he got her car running again. What Marcus didn't know was that the elegant woman he pulled from the wreckage was Victoria Sterling, CEO of Sterling Medical Technologies and one of the most powerful executives in the healthcare industry. This is the story of a forgotten man whose act of kindness revealed extraordinary character and how one moment of human decency changed 2 lives forever. The amber glow of streetlights reflected off wet asphalt as Marcus Rivera crouched beneath the hood of a 2008 Honda Civic, his weathered hands working methodically to replace a timing belt. October rain drummed against the metal roof of Gonzalez Auto Repair, creating a steady rhythm that had become the soundtrack to his evening routine. At 34, Marcus carried himself with the quiet dignity of a man who had learned to find pride in honest work, even when that work barely paid the bills. His faded navy coveralls bore the name Marcus in red script above the left pocket, though the lettering had grown thin from countless washes. Grease stained his knuckles, and a thin scar ran along his right forearm, a souvenir from his early days learning the trade. Despite the physical toll of his work, his dark eyes remained alert and kind, reflecting a gentleness that contrasted with his calloused hands. The Honda belonged to Maria Santos, a local teacher who had brought it in 3 days ago with engine troubles. Marcus knew she couldn't afford the full repair cost, but he also knew she needed reliable transportation to get to her job at the elementary school. So he'd ordered used parts instead of new ones and planned to charge her only for materials, not labor. "Almost finished, old girl," he murmured to the car, tightening the last bolt on the timing belt cover. The engine turned over smoothly on the first try, purring with renewed life. Marcus smiled with quiet satisfaction. Another repair completed, another person helped, even if it meant his own bank account would remain dangerously low. He glanced at the clock on the shop wall. 8:15. Diego would be finishing his homework upstairs, probably hoping his father would have time to help with the math problems that had been giving him trouble. Marcus wiped his hands on a shop rag and began cleaning up his tools, the familiar ritual that marked the end of another long day. The small apartment above the auto shop wasn't much. 2 bedrooms, a cramped kitchen, and a living room that doubled as Diego's study area. But it was home. Marcus had rented it from old Roberto Gonzalez 5 years ago when he had first arrived in Millbrook, a struggling single father looking for a fresh start. Roberto had taken pity on him, offering both the apartment and a job at below-market rates in exchange for Marcus's dedication to keeping the shop running. As Marcus climbed the narrow stairs to their apartment, he could hear the television playing softly. Diego was sprawled on the worn couch, textbook open beside him, pencil dangling from his small fingers. At 8 years old, Diego had his father's dark eyes and serious expression, but with an innocence that Marcus worked hard to preserve despite their financial struggles. "How's the homework coming, mijo?" Marcus asked, settling beside his son on the couch. "Math is hard," he replied with frustration. "I don't understand these word problems." Marcus examined the worksheet, filled with problems about calculating distance and time. His own education had ended with high school, but he'd always been good with practical mathematics, the kind needed to measure engine components and calculate repair costs. "Let's work through this one together," Marcus said patiently, pointing to a problem about a train traveling between cities. "See, it's just like when we drive to visit Abuela. If we know how fast we're going and how long it takes, we can figure out how far we traveled." For the next hour, father and son worked through the problems together, Diego's confidence growing with each correct answer. These moments were precious to Marcus, times when he could be not just a provider, but a teacher and guide for his boy. "I'm done," Diego announced proudly, showing his completed worksheet. "I think I get it now." "You did great, buddy. Now go brush your teeth and get ready for bed. You've got school tomorrow." As Diego headed to the bathroom, Marcus's phone buzzed with a text message from Roberto Gonzalez. The old man had been battling diabetes for years, and his health had taken a turn for the worse recently. "Marcus, doctor says I need surgery next week. Might be out for a while. Can you handle the shop alone? Sorry for short notice." Marcus stared at the message, his stomach tightening with worry. Roberto was more than just his employer. He'd become a father figure, the man who had given Marcus a chance when no one else would. But handling the shop alone meant longer hours, more responsibility, and the constant stress of keeping the business afloat while Roberto recovered. "Dad, I'm ready for bed," Diego called from his bedroom. Marcus slipped his phone into his pocket and went to tuck his son in, pushing aside his concerns to focus on their bedtime routine. He read Diego a chapter from their current book, a story about a boy and his dog, and listened as his son said his prayers, including our traditional blessing for Roberto and all the people who brought their cars to the shop. "Dad," Diego said sleepily as Marcus turned off the bedside lamp, "are we poor?" The question caught Marcus off guard. He sat on the edge of the bed, choosing his words carefully. "We don't have a lot of money, mijo, but we have what we need. We have each other, we have a home, and we have good people who care about us. Tommy at school says his dad makes lots of money because he wears a suit to work. He says people who work with their hands are poor." Marcus felt a familiar ache in his chest, the weight of knowing that his choices had limited his son's opportunities. But he learned long ago that self-pity was a luxury he couldn't afford. "Tommy's dad has an important job," Marcus said gently, "but so do I. When people's cars break down, they need someone who knows how to fix them. When Mrs. Santos can't get to school because her Honda won't start, she needs me to help her. Every kind of work is important if it helps people. Like when you fix Mr. Chen's truck so he could deliver food to restaurants?" "Exactly like that," Marcus confirmed, pride warming his voice. "Now get some sleep. Tomorrow is school day." After Diego fell asleep, Marcus returned to the living room and opened his laptop, a battered machine he'd bought secondhand 3 years ago. The monthly bills were spread across the coffee table: rent, utilities, groceries, Diego's school supplies. The numbers never quite added up the way he'd hoped they would. His phone rang, interrupting his financial calculations. The caller ID showed Maria Santos's number. "Marcus, I hope it's not too late to call," she said when he answered. "I wanted to thank you for fixing my car so quickly. When I picked it up this evening, it ran better than it has in months." "Glad I could help, Maria. Drive safely, especially with this rain." "About the bill," she continued, her voice hesitant. "I know you only charge me for parts. I can't accept charity, Marcus. Let me pay you properly for your labor."
Marcus looked around his modest apartment, thinking of the stack of unpaid bills on the coffee table. The extra money would help, but he knew Maria was struggling too, a single teacher trying to make ends meet on a public school salary. "The work was easier than expected," he lied smoothly. "Besides, you bring Diego books from your classroom library. That's payment enough." After ending the call, Marcus returned to his bills with renewed determination. Roberto's upcoming surgery meant the shop's income would depend entirely on his efforts. He would need to work harder, take on more repairs, maybe even advertise for new customers. The responsibility felt overwhelming, but he'd faced worse challenges. At 10:30, Marcus finally closed the laptop and prepared for bed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: cars to fix, bills to pay, a son to provide for, and a mentor to support through his medical crisis. But tonight, in the quiet of their small apartment, with Diego sleeping peacefully in the next room, Marcus allowed himself a moment of gratitude for what they did have. He was drifting off to sleep when a tremendous crash jolted him awake. The sound of breaking glass and crumpling metal echoed from the street below, followed by the ominous hiss of escaping steam. Marcus was on his feet instantly, pulling on clothes and grabbing his phone. Through the apartment window, he could see the twisted wreckage of a luxury sedan wrapped around the guardrail directly across from the shop. Steam rose from the crumpled hood, and the driver's side door hung at an unnatural angle. There was no sign of movement from inside the vehicle. Marcus ran downstairs and across the rain-slicked street, his heart pounding. The sedan was a late-model Mercedes, its sleek lines now distorted by the impact. Through the spider-webbed windshield, he could see a figure slumped over the steering wheel. "Hello? Can you hear me?" he called, trying the driver's door. It was jammed shut, the frame bent from the collision. The passenger side was pressed against the guardrail, inaccessible. Marcus ran around to the back of the car where the rear window had shattered completely. Carefully clearing away the broken glass, he crawled through the opening into the back seat. The smell of gasoline was strong, and he could hear liquid dripping steadily onto the pavement. They didn't have much time. The driver was a woman, probably in her 40s, with shoulder-length brown hair streaked with gray. Blood trickled from a gash on her forehead, and her breathing was shallow but steady. She was unconscious but alive. Marcus had learned basic first aid during his brief stint in the Army Reserve years ago, and those skills kicked in now. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" he said, gently checking for obvious injuries. Her pulse was strong, and she didn't appear to have any broken bones, but head injuries were tricky. She needed medical attention quickly. Marcus dialed 911 on his phone, giving the dispatcher their location and a brief description of the accident. The nearest hospital was 20 minutes away, and with the rain making roads treacherous, it could be even longer before help arrived. The woman stirred slightly, mumbling incomprehensibly. Marcus tried to keep her calm and still, knowing that movement could worsen any potential spinal injuries. The gasoline smell was getting stronger, and he could see liquid pooling beneath the engine. They needed to get away from the vehicle. "Ma'am, I'm going to help you out of the car," he said clearly, hoping she could hear me. "Try to stay as still as possible." Very carefully, Marcus managed to extract her from the driver's seat and carry her away from the wreckage to the relative safety of his shop's covered entrance. She was elegantly dressed in a tailored business suit that probably cost more than Marcus made in a month, and her jewelry suggested considerable wealth. Her purse had spilled its contents during the crash: credit cards, a smartphone with a cracked screen, and what looked like prescription medication. As he waited for the ambulance, Marcus grabbed a clean shop towel and gently pressed it against the cut on her forehead to stop the bleeding. The woman's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and confused. What happened?" she whispered, trying to sit up. "You were in a car accident," Marcus said gently, keeping his hand on her shoulder to prevent sudden movement. "Help is coming." She looked at him with growing awareness, taking in his work clothes and the auto shop behind him. You pulled me out?" "The car was leaking gas. It wasn't safe to leave you there." The woman studied his face in the glow of the streetlight, something shifting in her expression. "I'm Victoria," she said softly. "Marcus. Just focus on breathing, Victoria. The paramedics will be here soon." "My car," she said, turning her head toward the wreckage. "It's destroyed, isn't it?" Marcus followed her gaze. The Mercedes was indeed a total loss. The front end crumpled, the driver's side caved in, and fluids leaking from multiple points. But something about the damage pattern caught his attention. The impact wasn't consistent with a simple loss of control on wet pavement. "What did you remember about the accident?" he asked carefully. Victoria closed her eyes, concentrating. "I was driving home from a board meeting. The rain was getting worse, and I was probably going too fast. Then," she paused, her face creasing with confusion. "Something was wrong with the steering. The car pulled hard to the right, like I'd hit ice, but the road was just wet." Marcus made a mental note of her description. Steering problems could indicate mechanical failure, which might be important for insurance purposes or even a potential lawsuit if the car had a defect. The sound of sirens finally broke through the rain, growing louder as emergency vehicles approached. Within minutes, paramedics were taking over Victoria's care, while police officers began documenting the accident scene. Marcus found himself pushed to the sidelines, which was fine with him. He'd done what he could. Officer Janet Morrison, a veteran of the Millbrook police force who knew Marcus from previous interactions around the shop, approached him while the paramedics loaded Victoria into the ambulance. "Nice work, Rivera," she said, making notes in her report. "Could have been a lot worse if she'd stayed in that car much longer. Tell me what you saw." Marcus recounted the sequence of events, including Victoria's comments about steering problems. Officer Morrison nodded thoughtfully, jotting down details. "We'll have the car towed to the impound lot for now. Insurance company will want to examine it. Strange, though. Road conditions aren't that bad tonight. Experienced driver in a high-end vehicle shouldn't have lost control like that." As the ambulance pulled away, Victoria briefly made eye contact with Marcus through the rear window. There was something in her expression. Gratitude, yes, but also a kind of assessment, as if she were filing away details about the man who had helped her.
The tow truck arrived shortly after, and Marcus watched as the crumpled Mercedes was loaded onto its bed. Even damaged, the car represented luxury beyond his imagination. The base model probably cost more than he made in 2 years. "Hey, Marcus," called Joey, the tow truck driver. "You want me to take this to Hendrick Salvage, or you got somewhere else in mind?" "Impound lot for now," Marcus replied. "Police investigation." Joey nodded and drove off into the night, leaving Marcus alone with the cleanup. He swept broken glass from the street and spread absorbent material over the spilled fluids, basic maintenance that would keep other drivers safe until the city crew arrived in the morning. By the time Marcus made it back upstairs, it was nearly midnight. Diego had slept through the entire commotion, exhausted from his long day at school. Marcus stood in his son's doorway for a moment, grateful that his boy's innocence remained intact for another day. Unable to sleep, Marcus found himself thinking about Victoria. There had been something familiar about her, though he was certain they'd never met. Her clothing and jewelry suggested wealth, but she'd shown genuine gratitude for his help, not the entitled attitude he might have expected from someone of obvious privilege. The next morning brought its usual routine: Diego's breakfast, a quick walk to the school bus stop, and the opening of Gonzalez Auto Repair for another day of work. But as Marcus unlocked the shop doors, he noticed a sleek black sedan parked across the street. 2 men in dark suits sat inside, and when Marcus looked in their direction, the driver started the engine and pulled away. The morning passed quietly until about 10 o'clock, when a silver BMW pulled into the shop's lot. A woman in her 30s stepped out, wearing business attire and carrying a leather briefcase. She approached Marcus with purposeful confidence. "Excuse me, are you Marcus Rivera?" "That's right. Can I help you with something?" "My name is Jennifer Walsh. I represent Sterling Medical Technologies. I understand you assisted one of our executives last night, Victoria Sterling." The name hit Marcus like a physical blow. Victoria Sterling. He'd heard that name before, seen it in business magazines at the grocery store checkout. Sterling Medical Technologies was one of the largest healthcare companies in the country, with annual revenues in the billions. "I helped a woman named Victoria who was in a car accident," Marcus confirmed carefully. "Is she all right?" "She's recovering well, thanks to your quick thinking. Miss Sterling asked me to express her gratitude and to inquire about having you examine her vehicle." Marcus frowned. The car was totaled. There is nothing to examine except scrap metal. "Actually, there is," Jennifer said, opening her briefcase and withdrawing several documents. "Miss Sterling believes there may have been a mechanical failure that caused the accident. She'd like you to inspect the steering and braking systems before the insurance company has the vehicle destroyed." I'm flattered by her confidence, but I'm just a neighborhood mechanic. If she suspects mechanical failure, she should hire a certified forensic automotive expert. Jennifer studied him with an expression that reminded Marcus's assessment the night before. "Miss Sterling was quite specific about wanting you to examine the car.
She said you demonstrated unusual competence and attention to detail. Marcus considered the request. Forensic automotive work paid well, and he desperately needed the income, especially with Roberto's surgery approaching. But it also meant taking on responsibility he wasn't sure he was qualified for. What would the examination involve? A thorough inspection of the steering and braking systems with particular attention to any signs of tampering or sabotage. The word sabotage changed everything. This wasn't just about mechanical failure. Someone might have deliberately tried to harm Victoria Sterling. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the October weather. Sabotage, he repeated. Has Miss Sterling received threats? Jennifer's expression remained carefully neutral. Miss Sterling has many business interests, and not all of her competitors appreciate her success. Will you examine the vehicle? Marcus thought about Diego, about their simple life above the auto shop, and how getting involved with someone like Victoria Sterling might complicate everything. But he also thought about the elegant woman who had thanked him with genuine warmth, who had trusted him enough to specifically request his services. I'll need to see the car first. If I think I'm qualified to give you a meaningful assessment, I'll take the job, but I won't take money for work I can't do properly.
Jennifer smiled for the first time since arriving. Miss Sterling said you would respond exactly that way. The vehicle is being held at the police impound lot. I can arrange access whenever you're available. This afternoon, Marcus decided, after I finish the repairs I've already committed to. Perfect, Jennifer said, handing him a business card with her contact information. One more thing, Mr. Rivera. This arrangement requires complete discretion. Miss Sterling's safety may depend on keeping this investigation confidential. As the BMW pulled away, Marcus stood in his shop doorway, holding Jennifer Walsh's business card and wondering what he'd just gotten himself into. Victoria Sterling was clearly more than just another wealthy accident victim. She was someone important enough to have enemies, someone whose car crash might have been attempted murder. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of routine repairs, but Marcus's mind kept wandering to the mysterious woman he'd pulled from the wreckage. What kind of life did someone lead when a car accident might be sabotage? What kind of enemies had Victoria Sterling made in building her business empire? At noon, Marcus called the elementary school to let them know Diego would be staying with Mrs. Chen, their elderly neighbor, for a few hours after school. Then he gathered his diagnostic tools and headed for the police impound lot where the remnants of Victoria Sterling's Mercedes waited to tell their story. Officer Morrison met him at the impound gate, looking puzzled by the unusual request. Forensic examination, she asked, reviewing the authorization Jennifer Walsh had faxed to the police station. This is a first for us. Usually, insurance adjusters handle this kind of thing. Apparently, Miss Sterling wants an independent assessment, Marcus explained, not mentioning the sabotage angle. I'm just here to look at the mechanical systems. The Mercedes sat in the impound lot like a wounded animal, its elegant lines distorted by the violence of the crash. Up close, in daylight, Marcus could see details that had been hidden in the darkness and rain of the previous night. The damage was extensive, but it was also specific, concentrated in areas that suggested the car had been traveling at moderate speed when it lost control. Marcus began his examination with the steering system, working methodically through the components that connected the steering wheel to the front wheels. What he found made his blood run cold. The power steering fluid reservoir was empty, its contents drained through a small puncture in the bottom of the container. The hole was perfectly round, about the size of a finishing nail, and too precise to be accidental damage from the crash. Someone had deliberately sabotaged Victoria Sterling's car, creating a steering failure that would become dangerous at exactly the wrong moment. As Marcus documented his findings with photographs and careful measurements, he realized that Victoria Sterling wasn't just a wealthy executive who'd been unlucky. She was someone important enough to have enemies, someone whose car crash might have been attempted murder. And now, by agreeing to investigate the sabotage, Marcus Rivera had made himself part of a dangerous game he didn't understand. The simple life he'd built for himself and Diego was about to become very complicated. The punctured power steering reservoir told a clear story to anyone who understood automotive systems. The saboteur had created a slow leak that would gradually drain the fluid over time, making the car increasingly difficult to control. In dry conditions, an experienced driver might have managed to maintain control even with failed power steering. But on rain-slicked roads, in poor visibility, the sudden loss of steering assistance could be fatal.
It was elegant in its simplicity and terrifying in its calculation. Someone had studied Victoria Sterling's habits, identified her vehicle, and planned an accident that would appear to be nothing more than unfortunate timing. If Marcus hadn't pulled her from the wreckage quickly, if the car had caught fire from the leaking gasoline, there would have been no evidence of sabotage at all. Marcus photographed the punctured reservoir from multiple angles, then examined the brake system with renewed urgency. What he found there was even more disturbing. The brake lines showed signs of partial cuts, not severed completely, but weakened to the point where they would fail under pressure. The combination of steering failure and brake failure would make any accident unsurvivable. Someone had wanted Victoria Sterling dead, and they'd planned her murder with mechanical precision. As Marcus packed up his tools, his hands trembling slightly from the implications of what he'd discovered, his phone rang. The caller ID showed Jennifer Walsh's number. "Mr. Rivera, how is your examination proceeding?" she asked. "I need to speak with Miss Sterling immediately," Marcus replied, his voice tight with controlled urgency. "And you need to contact the police. This wasn't an accident." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I see. Can you be at Millbrook General Hospital in an hour? Miss Sterling is being discharged this afternoon, and I think she would prefer to hear your findings in person." "I'll be there," Marcus confirmed, already walking toward his truck. As Marcus drove through the streets of Millbrook toward the hospital, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just taken an irreversible turn. This morning, he'd been a simple mechanic struggling to make ends meet. Now he was the keeper of secrets that could put both him and Diego in danger. But Victoria Sterling had trusted him with this investigation, and the evidence he'd uncovered demanded action. Someone had tried to commit murder, and if Marcus stayed silent, they might try again. The game had changed, and Marcus Rivera was no longer just a spectator. Whether he liked it or not, he was now a player in a deadly contest where the stakes were higher than anything he'd ever imagined. Millbrook General Hospital's executive floor was unlike anything Marcus had ever experienced. Marble floors gleamed under crystal chandeliers, and the nursing station resembled a luxury hotel concierge desk more than a medical facility. Security guards in tailored suits stood at discreet intervals, their watchful eyes tracking every visitor with professional scrutiny. Jennifer Walsh met Marcus at the elevator, her expression grave as she reviewed his preliminary report on her tablet. "The evidence is conclusive?" she asked, without preamble. "Both steering and brake systems were sabotaged," Marcus confirmed, his voice low. "Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. The damage was designed to look like mechanical failure after an accident." Jennifer nodded grimly. "Ms. Sterling suspected as much. She's been receiving threats for months, but the FBI couldn't find concrete evidence of danger. Your investigation changes everything." They walked down a corridor lined with expensive artwork, past rooms that looked more like hotel suites than hospital accommodations. At the end of the hall, 2 additional security guards flanked a set of double doors marked with a discreet placard reading "Sterling Suite." Inside, Victoria Sterling sat in an elegant chair beside floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. She wore a silk robe over her hospital gown, and despite the bandage on her forehead, she projected an aura of quiet authority.
Her laptop was open on a nearby table, surrounded by documents and what appeared to be financial reports. "Mr. Rivera," she said, rising to greet him with a warm smile, "Jennifer tells me your examination confirmed my suspicions." Marcus was struck again by her presence, not just her obvious wealth and position, but something deeper. There was steel beneath her polished exterior, the kind of strength forged by surviving in a ruthless business environment. "I'm sorry to say it does," Marcus replied, accepting her offered handshake. "Someone wanted you dead, Miss Sterling. The sabotage was professional and calculated." Victoria's expression didn't change, but Marcus saw her jaw tighten slightly. "Please, call me Victoria. And thank you for taking this investigation seriously. Many people would have dismissed it as paranoia from a wealthy woman who couldn't accept a simple accident." She gestured for him to sit in the chair across from her, while Jennifer took a position by the window, maintaining her role as both assistant and guardian. Marcus noticed that even in this secure environment, Victoria never fully relaxed. Her posture remained alert, her eyes constantly assessing. "I need to understand what I've gotten myself into," Marcus said directly. "Who wants you dead and why?" Victoria smiled at his straightforward approach. "I appreciate directness, Marcus. In my position, I encounter too much corporate diplomacy and careful phrasing. The simple answer is that Sterling Medical Technologies has disrupted several established industries, and not everyone appreciates the competition." She moved to her laptop, calling up a presentation that Marcus recognized as the kind of corporate overview he'd seen on business news programs. Charts and graphs filled the screen, showing Sterling Medical's dramatic growth over the past decade. The transformation was staggering. "What changed?" Marcus asked, genuinely curious despite the gravity of the situation. "We developed a breakthrough treatment for a rare genetic disorder affecting children," Victoria said, her voice softening slightly. "Instead of pricing it at market rates that would have made it inaccessible to most families, we created a tiered pricing system based on ability to pay. Rich countries and insurance companies subsidize the cost for poorer regions." Marcus was beginning to understand why Victoria might have enemies. "That approach probably didn't make you popular with other pharmaceutical companies." "Or with our own board of directors initially," Victoria admitted with a rueful smile. "But it worked. We gained market share, government contracts, and most importantly, we saved lives. Success bred success, and we expanded into medical devices, diagnostic equipment, and research partnerships with major universities." Jennifer cleared her throat from her position by the window. "The threats began about 18 months ago, shortly after we announced plans to enter the cardiac device market with a new pacemaker design." Victoria nodded, pulling up another document on her laptop. "Our pacemaker uses revolutionary technology that makes it significantly cheaper to manufacture while improving patient outcomes. If we succeed in bringing it to market, we'll capture a substantial share of a $20 billion industry." The implications were clear to Marcus, even with his limited business knowledge. Disrupting a market worth billions of dollars would create powerful enemies willing to go to extreme lengths to protect their interests. "Have you identified specific threats?" he asked. "The FBI is investigating several possibilities, but until now, we haven't had proof that someone actually acted on their threats." Victoria closed her laptop and turned her full attention to Marcus. "Which brings us to why I specifically requested your involvement in this investigation. You saved my life, Marcus, and your examination of the sabotage was thorough and professional. But there's something else I need to discuss with you." Marcus felt a familiar wariness settle over him. In his experience, conversations that began with praise usually led to requests he couldn't fulfill or didn't want to accept. "Last night, while I was recovering from the concussion, I had Jennifer research your background. I learned about your Army service, your mechanical expertise, and your reputation in Millbrook as someone who helps people regardless of their ability to pay." "I'm not sure where this is leading," Marcus said cautiously. Victoria leaned forward, her expression becoming more intense. Sterling Medical is expanding our diagnostic equipment division, and we need someone to head our field testing program. The position would involve evaluating new medical devices in real-world settings, ensuring they perform reliably under stress conditions.
Marcus blinked, certain he'd misunderstood. Miss Sterling, Victoria, I'm a mechanic. I fix cars and trucks, not medical equipment. The principles are remarkably similar, Victoria countered. Medical devices are mechanical systems that must function reliably in challenging environments. They require someone who understands how equipment fails under stress, someone who can identify potential problems before they become critical failures. Jennifer moved away from a window, pulling a folder from her briefcase. The position comes with a substantial salary increase, comprehensive health insurance, and educational opportunities for your son. Marcus felt his heart rate accelerate as he processed what was being offered. The salary figure Jennifer mentioned was more than 3 times what he made at the auto shop, enough to transform his and Diego's lives completely. This is incredibly generous, he said carefully, but I don't understand why you'd make such an offer based on one night's work. Victoria's expression became more serious. Because I need someone I can trust completely. And trust isn't something money can buy. You saved my life without knowing who I was or expecting any reward. You accepted the investigation into the sabotage, even though it put you at personal risk. Those are the qualities I need in someone who will have access to Sterling Medical's most sensitive projects. Marcus tried to wrap his mind around the magnitude of the offer. Financial security, a chance to use his mechanical skills in a new field, opportunities for Diego that had seemed impossible just days ago. It was everything he'd hoped for and more than he'd dared to dream. There would be travel involved, Jennifer added, consulting her notes. Field testing takes place at hospitals and clinics around the world. You'd be away from home periodically, but never for more than a week at a time. The mention of travel brought Marcus back to reality. I can't leave Diego for extended periods. He's only 8, and I'm all he has. Victoria smiled. We anticipated that concern. Sterling Medical has an excellent relationship with Millbrook Academy, a private school with small class sizes and individualized attention. Diego would receive a full scholarship, and the school provides after-school care and tutoring support. Marcus felt overwhelmed by the scope of what was being offered. It addressed every concern he might have raised, every obstacle to accepting the position. The transformation it would bring to their lives was almost too dramatic to comprehend. I need time to think about this, and I need to discuss it with Diego. This decision affects his life as much as mine. Of course, Victoria agreed. Take all the time you need. But Marcus, I want you to understand something. This offer isn't charity or gratitude for saving my life. It's a business decision based on your demonstrated competence and character. Sterling Medical needs people like you. As if on cue, Marcus's phone buzzed with a text message from Mrs. Chen, the neighbor watching Diego. The message was brief but concerning. Police were asking about you at the school. Diego is fine but worried. Marcus showed the message to Victoria, who immediately turned to Jennifer with a look of sharp concern. Contact Agent Martinez at the FBI field office. Tell him we need protection for Mr. Rivera and his son immediately. Protection? Marcus asked, alarm growing in his chest. Victoria's expression had hardened into something Marcus recognized from business magazine profiles. The face of a woman who had survived corporate warfare and wasn't about to let anyone threaten people under her protection. If the people who sabotaged my car know you identified the evidence, they may see you as a threat, she explained grimly. We can't take chances with your safety or Diego's. The reality of the danger he'd inadvertently entered hit Marcus with full force. By agreeing to examine Victoria's car, by discovering the sabotage, he'd made himself a target of the same people who'd tried to commit murder. His simple act of helping an injured victim had drawn him into a deadly game where the stakes kept escalating. I need to get to Diego, Marcus said, rising from his chair, if there's any chance he's in danger. Jennifer will arrange for a security team to escort you.
Victoria interrupted smoothly, "and I want both of you moved to a safe location until we can assess the threat level." "A safe location?" Marcus repeated. "Victoria, I can't uproot Diego's entire life because I looked at your car." Victoria stood as well, her voice taking on the tone of someone accustomed to making decisions under pressure. "Marcus, the people who tried to kill me have resources, connections, and a demonstrated willingness to commit murder. If they perceive you as a threat, they won't hesitate to eliminate that threat." The clinical way she discussed the possibility of his death sent a chill down Marcus's spine. This was the world Victoria Sterling lived in, a world where business competition could escalate to attempted murder, where knowing too much could be a death sentence. Jennifer was already on her phone, speaking in low, urgent tones to someone she assumed was the FBI agent. Her side of the conversation included phrases like immediate extraction and safe house protocol that belonged in spy movies, not in his real life. "There's something else you need to know," Victoria said, moving closer to the window as if checking for threats, even on the executive floor of the hospital. "The timing of last night's attack wasn't random. I was driving home from a board meeting where we finalized plans to announce the pacemaker program publicly next week." Marcus was beginning to understand the larger picture. Someone knew about the announcement and wanted to stop it. Or they wanted to create chaos within Sterling Medical that would delay or derail the program. My death would have triggered a power struggle among the board members, probably resulting in a more conservative leadership that would abandon the pacemaker project. The sophisticated nature of the plot was becoming clear. This wasn't just about eliminating Victoria Sterling. It was about manipulating the entire future direction of her company through her murder. The calculated coldness of it made Marcus feel sick. Jennifer ended her phone call and approached us with an expression of professional urgency. "Agent Martinez is dispatching a team to the school immediately. They'll secure Diego and bring him here, where we can ensure his safety while we assess the threat." "Here?" Marcus asked. "To the hospital?" Sterling Medical maintains a secure facility adjacent to the hospital for executive protection. It's essentially a safe house disguised as corporate offices. You and Diego can stay there until we determine whether the threat extends to you. The surreal nature of his situation struck Marcus again. 12 hours ago, his biggest concerns were paying rent and helping Diego with homework. Now he was discussing safe houses and FBI protection, contemplating a job offer that would change their lives forever, all because he'd pulled an injured woman from a wrecked car. "Agent Martinez wants to debrief you about your findings. The sabotage evidence you discovered is crucial for their investigation into the threats against Miss Sterling."
Marcus nodded, though his thoughts were entirely focused on Diego. His son was probably confused and frightened, wondering why police were asking questions about his father, not understanding that their simple life above the auto shop was about to change dramatically. "I accept your job offer," Marcus said suddenly, the words emerging before he'd consciously decided to speak them. Victoria raised an eyebrow. "Are you certain? This is hardly the ideal time for such a major decision." "It's exactly the right time," Marcus replied, his voice gaining strength as he articulated his reasoning. "If these people are willing to kill to protect their business interests, then what you're doing, making medical devices more affordable and accessible, is work worth supporting. And if Diego and I are already targets, we're safer with your resources protecting us than trying to hide in our apartment." Victoria's expression softened into something approaching warmth. "I was hoping you'd see it that way. Sterling Medical needs people who understand that some fights are worth the risks they entail." Jennifer smiled for the first time since Marcus had met her. "I'll begin processing your employment paperwork immediately. There are security clearances, background checks, and orientation programs to complete, but we can expedite everything, given the circumstances." "What about Diego's school and our apartment, Roberto's shop? I can't just disappear from my responsibilities." "Roberto Gonzalez will be contacted and offered a consulting contract with Sterling Medical. We need experienced mechanics for our fleet maintenance program, and his recovery period would be perfect for transitioning into a less physically demanding role." Marcus stared at her, impressed, despite himself, by the thoroughness of her planning. You've thought of everything. Success in business requires anticipating contingencies, Victoria replied. But Marcus, I want you to understand that accepting this position means entering a world where the stakes are higher than anything you've experienced. The rewards are substantial, but so are the dangers. Through the hospital window, Marcus could see the city of Millbrook spreading out below, the modest neighborhoods where he'd lived, the elementary school where Diego learned and played with friends, the auto shop where he'd found purpose and honest work. All of it was about to become part of his past as he stepped into an uncertain but potentially transformative future. His phone buzzed again. This time it was a call from Agent Martinez, whose voice was crisp with professional authority. Mr. Rivera, we have your son in protective custody. He's safe and asking for you. Can you meet us at the Sterling Medical Facility in 30 minutes? On my way, Marcus replied, relief flooding through him at the confirmation of Diego's safety. As they prepared to leave the hospital, Victoria placed a gentle hand on Marcus's shoulder. I know this is overwhelming. The transition from your current life to what we're offering represents a dramatic change, but I believe you have the strength and character to handle both the opportunities and the challenges ahead. Marcus looked at her, seeing not just the wealthy executive who had made him an incredible offer, but the woman he'd pulled from a wrecked car less than 24 hours ago. The woman who was willing to risk her life to make medical care more accessible to people who couldn't afford it. The woman whose enemies were now his enemies. Let's go see my son, he said simply. Everything else we can figure out as we go. As they left Millbrook Hospital under discreet but heavy security, Marcus realized that his life had been irrevocably changed by a moment of human decency on a rain-soaked street. The mechanic who had saved Victoria Sterling was about to become something entirely new, a man with the resources and support to build the kind of future for Diego that had once seemed impossible. The simple act of helping a stranger had opened doors Marcus never knew existed. Whether those doors led to opportunity or danger remained to be seen. But as the security convoy wound through the streets of Millbrook toward his new life, Marcus Rivera felt ready to discover what lay beyond. Behind them, unknown to the occupants of the secure vehicles, a surveillance team in an unmarked van began following at a discreet distance. Their orders simple but deadly. Eliminate the mechanic who knew too much, along with anyone who might protect him. The real danger was just beginning. The Sterling Medical Secure Facility looked like any other corporate office building from the outside, but Marcus quickly discovered that appearances were deceiving. Beneath its mundane exterior lay a sophisticated security operation that rivaled government installations. Biometric scanners, bulletproof glass, and armed guards created multiple layers of protection that spoke to the very real dangers Victoria Sterling faced in her business dealings. Agent Martinez met them in the underground parking garage, his FBI credentials and serious demeanor immediately apparent. He was a compact man in his 40s with graying temples and the alert posture of someone accustomed to dangerous situations. Mr. Rivera, we need to discuss what you discovered in Miss Sterling's vehicle, he said without preamble, as they walked toward secured elevators. Your findings confirm our worst suspicions about the threats against Sterling Medical. They rode up to the 15th floor in silence, the weight of the situation settling over Marcus like a heavy coat. Through the elevator's bulletproof windows, he could see the familiar skyline of Millbrook, but it felt like viewing his old life from an impossible distance. The elevator opened into a reception area that managed to be both elegant and fortress-like. Diego sat in a comfortable chair near floor-to-ceiling windows, flanked by two female agents who were clearly trying to keep him calm and entertained. When he saw his father, relief flooded his young face. "Dad, the agent said you were helping solve a case, but I was scared something happened to you." "I'm fine, mijo," Marcus assured him, feeling his own tension ease at holding his son safely. "These people are friends who are helping us with a problem." Agent Martinez gestured toward a conference room equipped with video screens and secure communication equipment. "If we could have a few minutes for the debriefing, your son can wait here with Agents Foster and Chen. We have games, books, and snacks available."
Diego looked uncertain until Victoria Sterling approached with a warm smile. Despite her bandaged forehead and the stress of the situation, she projected an aura of calm authority that seemed to reassure the 8-year-old. "You must be Diego," she said, kneeling to his eye level. "Your father is a very brave man who helped me when I was in trouble. We're going to make sure both of you are safe while we solve this problem." "Are you rich?" Diego asked, with characteristic childhood directness, taking in Victoria's expensive clothes and jewelry. Victoria laughed, the first genuinely carefree sound Marcus had heard from her. "I suppose I am. Does that bother you?" Diego considered this seriously. "Dad says money doesn't make people good or bad. What they do makes them good or bad. Your father is very wise, and I hope you'll judge me by what I do, not how much money I have." In the conference room, Agent Martinez spread Marcus's photographs of the sabotaged vehicle across a large table. The images looked even more damning under the bright fluorescent lights. The deliberately punctured power steering reservoir, the partially severed brake lines, the calculated precision of the sabotage. "This level of mechanical expertise suggests professional involvement," Martinez observed, studying the photos with a magnifying glass. "Whoever did this has extensive automotive knowledge and access to Miss Sterling's vehicle." Victoria leaned forward, her business-focused demeanor returning. "The car was serviced at Prestige Motors 3 days before the accident. It's the dealership where I've taken all my vehicles for the past 5 years." "We'll investigate that connection immediately," Martinez replied, making notes. "But Mr. Rivera, I need you to understand that your identification of this sabotage makes you a key witness in a federal investigation. The people responsible for this attempt on Miss Sterling's life now have reason to view you as a threat." The reality of his changed circumstances hit Marcus again. He'd gone from anonymous mechanic to federal witness in the span of 24 hours, all because he'd stopped to help an injured stranger. "What kind of protection are we talking about?" Marcus asked, thinking of Diego's innocent question about Victoria's wealth and how their simple life was being transformed by forces beyond his control. "Short term, we're relocating you and your son to a safe location until we can identify and arrest the perpetrators. Long term depends on what we discover about the scope of this conspiracy." Jennifer Walsh, who had been quietly coordinating on her phone, looked up from her device. "There's been a development. Our security team detected surveillance on Mr. Rivera's apartment building and the auto shop. Someone has been watching both locations since early this morning." The news sent a chill through Marcus. The danger wasn't theoretical, it was immediate and focused on the life he'd built in Millbrook. "What about Roberto? He's scheduled for surgery, and if these people think he knows something..." "We're bringing Mr. Gonzalez into protective custody as a precaution. Medical care will continue at a secure facility until we resolve this situation." Victoria stood and moved to the conference room windows, her gaze fixed on the city below. "This escalation confirmed what we suspected. The attack on me wasn't an isolated incident. It's part of a larger campaign to stop Sterling Medical's expansion into the cardiac device market." "Who benefits if your pacemaker program fails?" Marcus asked, trying to understand the broader context of the danger they faced. 3 major medical device manufacturers currently control 80% of the pacemaker market, Victoria replied, turning back to the group. "Our new technology threatens to reduce their profits by billions of dollars over the next decade."
Martinez pulled up files on his tablet, showing corporate logos and executive photographs. Meridian Medical, Hartwell Industries, and Consolidated Healthcare Systems all have the resources to organize sophisticated corporate espionage and intimidation campaigns. But attempted murder crosses a line that most corporations won't cross, Jennifer added. This suggests we're dealing with individuals who have moved beyond normal business competition into criminal territory. The scope of the conspiracy was becoming clearer, but so was the danger. Marcus realized that accepting Victoria's job offer hadn't just changed his career prospects. It had made him and Diego targets in a war between corporate giants where human life was apparently expendable. A soft knock interrupted their discussion. Agent Foster appeared in the doorway with an apologetic expression. I'm sorry to interrupt, but Diego is asking for his father. I think the stress is starting to affect him." Marcus immediately left the conference room, finding his son curled in one of the comfortable chairs with tears threatening at the corners of his eyes. The 8-year-old was trying to be brave, but the unfamiliar surroundings and presence of armed federal agents had overwhelmed his composure. "Hey, buddy," Marcus said softly, sitting beside Diego and pulling him close. "I know this is scary and confusing." "Are we in trouble, Dad? Did we do something wrong?" The innocent question broke Marcus's heart. His son was experiencing fear and displacement because Marcus had made the moral choice to help an injured woman and investigate potential murder. The unfairness of it was staggering. "We're not in trouble," Marcus assured him. "But there are some bad people who don't want Miss Sterling to help sick people get better. Because I helped her figure out what the bad people did, we need to stay somewhere safe for a while." Diego processed this with the serious concentration he applied to difficult math problems. "Like when superheroes have to protect people from villains?" "Something like that," Marcus agreed, grateful for his son's ability to frame the situation in terms he could understand. Victoria had followed them from the conference room and now approached cautiously. "Diego, would you like to see something cool while your father finishes his meeting?" When Diego nodded, Victoria led them to another part of the facility where a large window looked into what appeared to be a medical laboratory. Technicians in white coats worked with sophisticated equipment, testing devices that Marcus assumed were prototypes of Sterling Medical's innovations. "This is where we make machines that help people's hearts work better. Some children are born with hearts that don't work properly, and these devices help them live normal lives." Diego pressed his face to the window, watching the technicians with fascination. "Like fixing a broken engine?" "Exactly like that," Victoria smiled. "Your father is very good at fixing engines, and we think he could help us make these heart machines work even better." Marcus felt a surge of pride and purpose as he watched his son's interest in the medical devices. This was meaningful work. Not just a job that paid well, but a chance to use his mechanical skills to save lives. The danger and displacement suddenly felt worthwhile if it led to opportunities like this. Agent Martinez appeared beside them, his expression urgent. "We need to move you to the safe house immediately. Our surveillance team detected suspicious activity around this building. Someone may have tracked you here." The next few minutes passed in a blur of professional efficiency. Federal agents coordinated their departure while Sterling Medical security teams prepared alternate routes and backup protocols. Marcus found himself impressed by the level of protection Victoria's resources could provide, even as he worried about the need for such extensive measures. Diego handled the transfer with remarkable composure, treating it as an adventure rather than a frightening experience. The safe house turned out to be a suburban residence that looked perfectly ordinary from the outside, but was equipped with sophisticated security systems and 24-hour protection. That evening, as Diego slept in his temporary bedroom under the watchful eyes of federal agents, Marcus sat with Victoria in the safe house living room, both of them processing the day's revelations. "I'm sorry your life has been turned upside down because of me. If I'd known that examining the car would put you and Diego in danger, I would have found another way." Marcus considered her words, then shook his head. "You didn't force me to help you or to accept the investigation. I made those choices because they felt right. And honestly, the job you offered represents opportunities I never could have imagined for Diego and myself. But at what cost? Living under protection, constantly looking over your shoulder, worrying about your son's safety? Is any career worth that?" Marcus looked toward the hallway where his son slept peacefully, protected by people who had dedicated their lives to keeping others safe. If the work truly helps people, then yes, it's worth the risks. But I need to know that Sterling Medical is what you say it is, a company that puts helping people above profit margins. Victoria's expression became more serious.
I can't promise that every decision we make will be perfect, or that we'll never face situations where profit and principle conflict. But I can promise that our core mission, making medical care more accessible and affordable, will never be compromised as long as I'm running the company. Over the next 3 days, while FBI agents worked to identify and apprehend the people responsible for the sabotage, Marcus learned more about Sterling Medical's operations and his potential role within the company. The field testing position Victoria had offered was even more significant than he had initially understood. Medical devices underwent rigorous testing before receiving regulatory approval, but real-world performance often revealed problems that laboratory conditions couldn't predict. Marcus would be responsible for identifying these issues and working with engineering teams to develop solutions, exactly the kind of problem-solving work he had always enjoyed. On Thursday morning, Agent Martinez arrived at the safe house with news that would finally resolve our situation. "We've arrested 3 individuals in connection with the sabotage of Miss Sterling's vehicle," he announced, his satisfaction evident. 2 employees of Meridian Medical and a contract assassin with connections to corporate espionage operations. Marcus felt a weight lift from his shoulders that he hadn't realized he had been carrying. "Are you certain they were working alone?" "The evidence suggests a limited conspiracy, focused specifically on eliminating Miss Sterling before the pacemaker announcement," Martinez explained. "With the perpetrators in custody and the FBI investigation ongoing, the immediate threat to you and your family has been neutralized." Victoria, who had arrived early that morning to hear the update, looked relieved but not surprised. "Meridian Medical has been our most aggressive competitor. Their executives saw our pacemaker program as an existential threat to their market dominance."
What happens now? Marcus asked, thinking of the normal life he and Diego had left behind just days ago. "That depends on what you want to happen," Victoria replied. "The job offer stands regardless of the circumstances that brought us together. Sterling Medical still needs someone with your skills and character to lead our field testing program." Marcus looked around the safe house that had been their temporary refuge, thinking about the apartment above Roberto's shop that no longer felt like home, about the opportunity to build a better future for Diego, about work that could make a real difference in people's lives. "I accept," he said simply, "but I want to start slowly, maybe part-time initially, so Diego can adjust to the changes gradually." Victoria smiled with genuine warmth. "We can arrange whatever schedule works best for your family. The most important thing is having you on the team." 2 weeks later, Marcus Rivera stood in his new office at Sterling Medical Headquarters reviewing technical specifications for a portable cardiac monitor that would be tested at rural clinics across the country. Through his window, he could see Millbrook Academy, where Diego was thriving in small classes with individual attention from dedicated teachers. The transition hadn't been without challenges. Moving from their cramped apartment to a comfortable house in a safe neighborhood, adapting to a corporate environment after years of independent work, learning the complexities of medical device testing, all of it required adjustment and patience. But when Marcus received his first field report from a clinic in rural Montana, documenting how Sterling Medical Devices had enabled early detection of heart problems in patients who previously lacked access to advanced medical care, he knew he'd made the right choice. Roberto Gonzalez had recovered from his surgery and accepted a consulting position with Sterling Medical's Fleet Maintenance Division, allowing him to use his automotive expertise in a less physically demanding role. The auto shop had been sold to one of Roberto's former employees, ensuring continuity for the customers who depended on its services. On a Friday evening in December, Marcus was leaving the Sterling Medical building when he encountered Victoria in the parking garage. She was loading files into her car, preparing for what he'd learned was her typical weekend of work and travel. "How was your first month?" she asked, genuinely interested in his assessment. "Challenging and rewarding," Marcus replied honestly. "The learning curve is steep, but the work feels important in a way that fixing cars never did." Victoria nodded, understanding his meaning. saving one life at a time versus potentially saving thousands through better medical technology. Exactly, Marcus agreed, though I still think there is dignity in any work that helps people regardless of scale. As they talked, Diego emerged from the building's daycare center, his backpack slung over his shoulder and his face bright with excitement about a science project involving simple machines and mechanical advantage. "Miss Sterling," he called, running over to them, "I got an A on my presentation about levers and pulleys." "That's wonderful, Diego," Victoria replied, kneeling to his level as she had the first time they'd met. "Are you thinking about becoming an engineer like your father?" "Maybe, but I also want to help sick people get better. Could I be both?" Victoria and Marcus exchanged glances, both recognizing the potential in the 8-year-old's ambitious thinking. "I think you could be anything you set your mind to. Engineering and medicine work together all the time to create devices that save lives." As they prepared to part ways, Victoria turned to Marcus with an expression of quiet satisfaction. "You know, when I first made the decision to hire you, it was based on instinct as much as logic. Your technical skills were obvious, but what convinced me was your character, the kind of person who stops to help a stranger without expecting anything in return." Marcus felt the truth of her words, remembering that rain-soaked night when he'd pulled her from the wreckage without knowing who she was or how it would change his life. Sometimes the most important decisions we make happen in moments when we're not thinking about consequences. We just do what feels right and deal with whatever follows. That's exactly the kind of thinking Sterling Medical needs. People who prioritize doing the right thing over calculating personal advantage. As Marcus and Diego drove home through the December evening, past the familiar streets of Millbrook where their old life had unfolded, Marcus reflected on the extraordinary series of events that had brought them to this point. A single act of human decency had opened doors he'd never imagined, creating opportunities for both him and his son that seemed almost too good to be true. But the most remarkable transformation wasn't in their external circumstances. It was in the sense of purpose that now guided his daily work. Every device he tested, every problem he solved, every improvement he suggested carried the potential to save lives and reduce suffering for people he would never meet. "Dad," Diego said from the passenger seat, breaking into his thoughts, "do you think we're helping people now?" Marcus considered the question as they turned into their new neighborhood, where houses sat behind well-maintained lawns and children played safely in front yards. "I think we're trying to help people, mijo," he replied. "And sometimes that's the most important thing we can do. Try to make things better for others, even when it's difficult or dangerous." Diego nodded with the seriousness that had characterized him since the events that transformed their lives. "Like superheroes, but with real jobs." "Like superheroes with real jobs," Marcus agreed, smiling at his son's perspective. As they pulled into their driveway, Marcus felt a deep sense of gratitude for the series of choices and chances that had led them here. The scared, struggling single father who had lived above Roberto's auto shop seemed like a different person now, though the core values that had guided that man remained unchanged. He still believed in helping others without expecting reward, in the dignity of honest work, in the importance of being present for his son. But now he had the resources and opportunities to live those values on a larger scale, to make a difference not just in his immediate community, but in the lives of people around the world who needed better access to medical care. The story that had begun with a car crash on a rainy night in Millbrook had evolved into something neither Marcus nor Victoria could have predicted. A single moment of human decency had created connections, opportunities, and purposes that would shape both their lives for years to come. And as Marcus tucked Diego into bed in their comfortable new home, reading him a story about innovation and perseverance, he knew that the most important part of their journey was just beginning. They had found not just security and opportunity, but work that mattered and relationships built on mutual respect and shared values. The poor single dad mechanic who had saved an injured woman from a wrecked car had discovered that sometimes, when you choose to help others without counting the cost, The universe finds ways to help you in return, not through magic or coincidence, but through the simple truth that good people tend to recognize and support each other when given the chance. Marcus Rivera had saved Victoria Sterling's life on a dark, rain-soaked street in Millbrook. In return, she had saved his future, creating opportunities for him and Diego that would ripple forward through generations. It was a fair exchange built on trust, character, and the belief that everyone deserves the chance to reach their full potential. And as snow began to fall outside their window, covering the familiar streets of Millbrook in pristine white, Marcus knew that their story was no longer about survival or struggle. It was about purpose, partnership, and the extraordinary things that become possible when good people choose to help each other reach for something better. The transformation was complete, but the important work of helping others and building a better world, was just beginning.